Hello everyone. In preparation for the upcoming CAIDP conference on October 7th and 8th, CAIDP is hosting a few webinars to help members get excited about the opportunities ahead. Thank you for watching this webinar, brought to you by the Forum for International Trade Training, FITT, a not-for-profit organization that provides international business training, resources, and professional certification. FITT's goal is to improve your organization in standing out and making the most out of its opportunities. FITT provides various courses in market entry strategies, global market, trade finance, and more. They also offer the designation of a Certified International Trade Professional, which demonstrates credibility and competency. Now, Nicole, a content marketing specialist with FITT, will expand on how FITT can help you.
Thank you, Marcus. FITT's international business and global trade training can help you enhance your skills, know-how, and credibility and stand out from the competition. Whether you're looking to grow your business or meet your own personal career goals, with FITT's online training, you can learn from anywhere and anytime it's convenient. Target the global trade topics that matter the most to you, or complete all the courses and earn your CITP, the Certified International Trade Professional Certification. We're offering a special opportunity today to get early access to our new FITT Skills Lite online course previews. Early access to these free, downloadable ebooks gives you the option to try before you buy. If you're wondering if FITT Skills is right for you, take advantage of these free course previews with no commitment. You can take advantage of these industry-backed resources taken directly from the accredited FITT Skills program, and you can learn without deadlines or an exam. Follow the link in the presentation to get your free downloads. And bonus, for a limited time only, downloading a unit also gives you 25% off the purchase of a related course or workshop. It's my pleasure now to introduce to you our presenter today, Greg Henderson, CITP, Principal International Trade Consultant and President of Channel Spark International. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you, and thank you to everybody that is attending today. We appreciate taking the interest and learning a bit more about how to export services. And with that in mind, we'll get straight into the presentation and start talking about how to look at or prepare for exporting services into international markets. So the one thing that I've found over the past 3 or 4 years is that when you're selling services, obviously, it's much more of a challenge than selling a product. So today, what we really want to focus on is to leave you with 3 primary ideas or action items that you can use to start to build out an export plan and then plan for entry into new markets. And the reason that I've chosen 3 is that even though we've helped companies export into international markets in practically every sector, whether it's software development, services, products, marine, we keep finding that the same things and the same needs and the same efforts that are done tend to fall into these 3 categories that make, I guess you could say, streamline your ability to be able to go into international markets. So one of them is truly understanding what your value is, what your top service is, and how to explain it clearly and concisely in an international market. The second is truly understanding which market is best, having done your homework and making sure that that market is a market that is going to be receptive to your particular services. And then, of course, knowledge, education, research. And understanding the market, understanding entry points to the market, understanding who's working in the market, and understanding your competitors. It actually doesn't come down to the feature set, surprisingly enough. It comes down to how well you can explain the value of what you do, making sure that you're speaking to the right type of prospect, and then making sure that you understand a bit about the culture and the way into the market And we'll talk to all of these topics extensively through the webinar today. So no matter how many times you go to any export training, you're probably going to see the starting point being what's called export readiness. And we do that on purpose. That's because you really have to take a snapshot of your organization, your current sales capabilities, your readiness for exporting, regardless of whether you have a large manufacturing center that you've just expanded capacity, or whether you're actually a single consultant who is looking to work on a large project in an international market. And the number one thing that we always are trying to ensure is that you have a plan. And failing to plan is planning to fail, like my grandmother used to say. The reality is that in order to have an export plan and a successful guide to entering an international market, you need a business plan and you need a strategy that identifies what it is you're selling, who it is you're selling it to, and then of course which particular markets, and then what marketing efforts you need to take in order to be successful in that particular market. Writing it down actually helps to create a structured step-by-step process that defines what you're going to do, who you're going to talk to, and of course, who you should partner with, or even changes you might have to make to marketing and website. And we find that 90% of any exporter who's just starting out that fails ends up failing because of that lack of a plan. You want to see whether or not there's somebody on your staff or yourself that has experience with having done exporting or done international. Now, you don't need to fret if you haven't had that much experience. Then what you're looking for is a mentor or somebody that you can connect with, somebody on LinkedIn that you've done business with, or even people that are part of associations that you can chat with and discuss the idea of international expansion, exporting, or even taking courses that are going to help get you ready for that particular expansion into international markets. This is important because what you don't know is really what's going to affect you the most. And even people that have traveled to 50 or 60 countries or have done business in hundreds of countries still trip on their way into the market. And tripping means expensive extra costs, or of course, waste time, which as a consultant is extremely important to avoid. The final thing that we do on export readiness is to say, do you have the capacity for expansion? And this is a fairly simple thing, but sometimes it surprises us. If you're at 80% busy all the time, and then you're asked to do a project in a different country, suddenly you're dealing with time zones, you're dealing with different market reaction times, you're dealing with more administration. Sometimes you're dealing with translations, and then you have delays on translations. So you have to look at your capability and capacity to be able to take on more projects or more work. And then this actually then suggests, if you don't have the capacity, but you do want to continue with the project, how do we partner with somebody or bring somebody on easily and effectively? This is part of your business plan and your export plan. What's going to happen if I do win a very large project? And these are all fairly basic and straightforward things, but they're important things. So one of the things that the FITT courses offer are intensive chapters and of course exercises and references and different articles that can be read that are specific to this particular topic. And the course Feasibility of International Trade offered by FITT is where an awful lot of this checklist, this export readiness and the subject matter comes from. So clearly that course would be an excellent starting point for anybody that wants to build an export plan and then start making sure that they're ready to be able to export. Multiple contracts at the same time, do you have a plan? And having that plan and being able to say, if you need to connect with partners both in market and perhaps other consultants in market here in Canada, let's make sure that we've written that down and that they're ready to actually implement that project smoothly. So this is actually common across the board. We've collected reasons for failure in exporting, both in different provinces, different sectors, different companies, different manufacturing centers. And as I said, 90 to 95% of the time, there was no plan. Not enough research was done. It's surprising that it doesn't matter how large the corporation, and sometimes corporations can be as large as Target or Walmart, and sometimes they could be one-man consultancy. But if you don't do enough research on the market and find out who it is that you need to talk to and how to talk to them correctly, you can fail at any size. The marketing message is critical, especially in markets where English is perhaps not the first language. Being able to clearly and quickly explain what you do is critical. Wasted time. A lot of markets, and we'll talk to this in a bit, but a lot of markets are actually, operating at a slower pace and/or require more relationship development, and that takes more time. If you haven't accounted for this, then this is obviously something that can cause delays or even waste further time. And ineffectual bidding, the inability to understand what you needed to put into an international bid for a proposal that's outside of Canada is critical to know as well. So to get into the topic of services, and we'll only spend a little bit of time on this, when you're selling services, it's harder. And one of the things that we've discovered is that you have to avoid things like a feature list or a description of what the widget is or what it is that's being sold that's a physical product, or something that can actually be put in a box and shipped out. We all know this is no big surprise, but the takeaway from that is the fact that you have to focus extremely tightly on the value add that you present. And this is about trust, this is about credibility, this is about core strengths, where you've had success, and then being able to relay that message either as part of the proposal process to your partnerships or directly through to the prospect or client. And so this is critical because you have to work twice or three times as hard to market and sell yourself if you're selling a service than selling a product. And that's the key difference. It's harder and it takes an awful lot more work, and you have to work hard at making sure that that message is clear and concise. We have a lack of tangibility. You can't just hand somebody, a flyer and say, this is what I do. Sometimes you have to work in the ability to present a unique solution for a client. Sometimes it's different. You can't just replicate things, or at least you can only replicate 60%. You have a lot of competition. There are an awful lot of other consultants who are pitching and responding to tenders, more so often than sometimes when you're dealing with a product and you might only have the top 3 or 4 that are being selected. It's a long sales cycle. So you have to be able to get in quick, get in early, and be able to clearly identify and pitch your unique value add and the services you provide so that you can be remembered and you can obviously make a difference when 6 months later they start considering a lot of the different types of proposals. So what you really want to focus on in any type of pitch is the value statement. So we'll go through a quick value statement exercise in a minute, but what you want to be able to do is to present a value statement that differentiates you, the consultant or service provider, and your services and your capabilities from every other competitor within 20 seconds. And this is something that actually is surprisingly just not worked through enough. And this is no fault of consultants or people selling services or selling products. This is just something that a lot of business owners or people that are selling products and services just don't take the time to be able to get down and to get it right. The fact is that if you can't explain to somebody in a different international market what you do in under 20 seconds, then they're going to start losing interest. They're going to phase out and look at other things. You're going to be challenged in actually explaining. And we want to talk about what we do, and we want to tell stories, and we want to go on for 5 minutes, and we want to be able to say, I'm good at this and this and that and that. But the reality is that you have to make an impact, catch their attention, and then be able to pitch the extra unique services or the answers to what they need. This is hard to do, and a lot of companies struggle with it. So we'll show you a quick exercise that explains how to develop that. And to be honest, it's practice. And the minute that you get it well enough that people go, oh, that's what you do, oh, tell me more, then you know that you're winning. You need to be able to show credibility as part of the value statement. So some of the biggest challenges I find from a marketing perspective is that you will get people saying, I solve my clients' problems, or I make my clients happy, or they might even say things like, I have a 100% success rate. That doesn't explain what you do and what your value is. That's simply a describer of how your clients think of you. But it's important to put that credibility into the value statement and then reuse that value statement, those adjectives and all of that descriptions across a number of different types of marketing, and make sure that there is an ability to use it on a website, for example, or to use it in a flyer, or to rework some of the descriptions, your 50, 100 word, 200 word descriptions of your company, and to make sure that that is consistent, especially on the website. So the goal of the value statement, and this is an example, and this is part of all of the training that we've delivered in the past little while. The goal is to come up with an ability to describe using adjectives in an active way, to be able to say what it is that you do in a single sentence. And this is really hard. I've had companies sometimes take weeks working this through, the entire executive team trying to do this exercise over and over and over again. But essentially what we want to be able to do is to say that the company provides some type of services to a specific type of client or customer type that provides a benefit. And it's, Channel Spark provides export training to Canadian service providers that help them prepare for and expand into international markets. So once you've done that statement, then you've explained what you do, and now you can actually add in the adjectives, which is you can use in-depth, experienced, international, global. There's lots of ways to actually build out and make that particular value statement exciting. And feel free to add in and keep trying lots of different things. But essentially what we want to be able to get to is say, I do this using adjectives for these types of clients that benefit them in this way. Using active voice is extremely valuable, but you can do passive voice. Hundreds of companies have taken training where we've helped to teach them to export to international markets through Channel Spark. So you can flip it into the passive voice, but the active tends to be a little bit more direct. Again, this is something that sometimes it seems so obvious, or it seems way too marketing 101. But I find that anywhere from 75 to 85% of all of the companies that come into the training benefit from doing this exercise, because it streamlines and simplifies the way that they pitch themselves and the way that they sell themselves. And this is very important in international markets for a lot of different reasons. But the primary one is that if you're complicated or you try to pitch too much, especially over the phone, you're going to lose their interest or their ability to be able to follow you, or even be able to comprehend what it is that you're pitching, especially if you go on for a couple of minutes. So this is something that if you use this particular exercise, you're going to benefit from it enormously. And we found that 100% of all of the companies that take the training that we deliver enjoy this particular exercise. It frustrates them, they still enjoy it. So how do we make sure that we're talking about the best things that we do versus all the things that we do? Again, the goal here is to streamline and simplify and explain quickly why we are the better choice than anybody else that is potentially competing for that particular project or selling that particular service. So it helps to focus on perhaps a unique service. So yes, we have a tendency of wanting to say, I can do everything, what do you need? But the reality is that doesn't help you when your competitor is saying, I do this perfectly, and that's exactly what the client needs. So you want to focus on the unique service of what you do best. I can do market research at Channel Spark. We can sell training courses at FITT. we want to make sure that we're focused on the thing that stands out, and hopefully it's something that you're very, very good at, and of course you enjoy doing. But at the end of the day, it has to be something that is your differentiation. Take some time to write down the 4 or 5 things that you feel that you do the best. The best possible way to get this is actually feedback from your clients. Have them tell you why they engaged with you, why did they work with you, why did they like working with you, and why did they want to continue working with you. That in itself is some of the best feedback you can get. You want to focus on your biggest success. I helped company ABC triple their capabilities and the workflows that they were capable of doing within the healthcare administration in company or country ABC's local sector and or their local market. This is something that is good to reiterate. It might not fully fit into the value statement, but it becomes sentence number 2, and it certainly becomes either a reference or case study on your website and or in some of your marketing literature. You want to think about the perfect client where everything just went so well and it works. It doesn't matter where that client is located. You want to learn the characteristics of that particular client. Why were they very, very good to have as a client? And of course, why would you want to work with more of them? And then the perfect market. Now that's more of a description of it potentially has a larger volume of the sector that you work in, or it might actually have more of the development offices or investment in development and funding from international sources than other markets. So you certainly want to be able to take that market and say, I want to go to that particular market because it has the best opportunity. This gets wrapped up into the value statement, where you can say, I sell a unique service that helps triple the capacity of warehouses for clients like Walmart, who have expanded and tripled their sales in the German market. That becomes a value statement. And that is what you want to get to be able to then start that pitch and then build out an awful lot of your particular types. So once you have the value statement, you want to start thinking about the client. And so we'll talk a little bit about the clients and their ability to understand the cultures that come from this. It should be no surprise that culture is going to be very important, and it's going to be something that you have to take into consideration whenever you start formulating both your pitch as well as any type of interaction and relationship development. So we've all probably seen what's on the screen here, which is how the cultures affect doing business in a particular market. There could be an awful lot more of these, but I've chosen these 4 as they tend to be the biggest differentiators in specific markets. And you have to know before you go into these markets how much you have to focus on establishing credibility, trust, and relationships versus being able to go into the market and pitch what you're doing and potentially sell. Obviously, hyper-competitive markets are like the United States. There are Asian markets that are hyper-competitive. They traditionally have an ease of market entry. They've got established processes and they've got open tendering systems, but they're hyper-competitive. And you will run into an awful lot of fast-moving competitors in that particular market. But as we know, an awful lot of markets, especially an example is Japan, is relationship-based. And these particular markets are where you won't really get anywhere, obviously, until you have established that relationship and you've shown that there is both credibility and trust. So for developing economies, such as economies in Africa, or emerging markets, such as Brazil, you have a mixture of the two, where you do need to have relationship-based, but they may be adopting technology so quickly that they'll check out your website on a mobile phone. The emerging markets are big markets and fast-moving markets. They are hyper-competitive, but they might not have the infrastructure, the workflows, and the processes. that actually help to simplify and streamline proposal and tender response processes, or even coming into markets like that and trying to establish relationships. You definitely have to research and understand if the country that you eventually select falls into one of these categories. Then you can do research on the culture, but you can go into it knowing and expecting the fact that they will either move quickly or they will move slowly. They might have an advanced ability to communicate, but that the way that business is done takes a bit longer because there might be infrastructure and or slow process or slow follow-up or all of the above. So once you have an understanding of that particular market and sector, that's where we're going to move into identifying the perfect client. Again, the FITT course that speaks really well to this particular topic is products and services for a global market. It's a combination of market research combined with understanding culture and understanding some of the things that you need to do in certain international markets. And what's really good about that particular course was the references to articles and stories. And it's always about the stories, because if you can learn from others that have tried before and either made seriously big errors or people that have had success, then this is something that's going to give you value, because this is knowledge that you can use beforehand, and you can even put it into your export plan. So the second thing that you need to do when trying to identify the perfect client is to understand that your total addressable market, we call it the TAM, isn't perhaps necessarily the total or number and the specific number of prospects that you need to go after. So by coming in and saying, well, there are healthcare process proposals and projects that help streamline the way that hospitals work in developing nations, to start by saying that, well, that's 100 developing nations and all of them have hospitals, is not good enough when it comes to identifying your client, your perfect prospect. You need to understand who that perfect prospect is, and that's going to be based on what we talked about earlier, which is what was that perfect client and why did that work, and why did my service help them, and why did they want to work with me? We need to understand who deals with your type of consultancy the most. Is it a hospital administrator? Is it somebody in Geneva that's handing out funding for particular projects proposals? Is it somebody that's actually at the technology level at a hospital who implements IT solutions and you're helping to upgrade those IT solutions? You need to understand who those particular people are and what their roles are, to make sure that you can now make it easy to create that list of those contacts, or more importantly, find out how they have contributed to getting proposals out, and then of course being part of that process. There's nothing better than knowing somebody at the hospital or at the organization within that particular market that is responsible for building out that particular proposal, because you're contributing to it, and it actually helps you long term, both from selling as well as potentially running the project. So try to narrow it down, try to figure out who that person might be, rather than simply saying there are 20 markets and all I have to do is to send an email to the CEO of every hospital in that particular market. Again, sounds obvious, this is marketing 101, but what we have found is that when you are too generic with your perfect client description, you overwork yourself, and your success rate and your close rate, more importantly, drops exponentially. You want your close rate to be as high as possible because you have selected the perfect potential prospect. Shotgun marketing, as they call it, if you send out 10,000 emails, less than 1% response, whereas a very targeted perfect client, relationship developed, talk to them regularly, and you've developed that trust, will increase that close rate 20, 30%. And that's what you want to aim for. So this is just a very quick overview of, a suggested way to finding that description of a perfect client. So we want to be able to understand what that service that is, or that particular organization is. So it might be making a hospital emergency ward 10% more capable of tracking information or statistics. You want to be able to understand what sector that is and where those clients are. You, of course, want to be able to pick a target market, and then you want to be able to use perhaps metrics or a common statistic to be able to then narrow down the number of target markets, which then further narrows down target clients and then starts to identify who those clients are. So the market that is best suited for your service has specific prospect clients in specific markets that have more of those particular types of clients and sectors than others, and that has a need for those types of services. So let's do an example. Perhaps you're a consulting service that reviews hospital administration to find ways of optimizing how that particular hospital works. So your target client would be a hospital administrator, and it might be potentially any hospital that has more than 50 beds, because any hospital less than 50 beds might not need those particular types of services, or they might not be interested, or more importantly, they might not be able to pay for those types of services. So you're going to want to choose markets that have a number of hospitals that fit that particular description, and then you want it to be a high enough number so that it validates and justifies going into that particular market. The statistic I'm using is that those tend to fall into countries that might fall within numbers 100 to 150 on the Worldwide Development Index. Or you might use the ease of market entry list to be able to say these particular markets are easier to enter than others. It helps to find that niche where those particular markets are probably more open to taking on your types of services, or for them in that particular market to be looking for development and aid projects that help solve these particular problems. So the development index is one thing, but there are a number of different indexes that, depending on your sector and depending on the type of service you sell, you can use to narrow down the markets to 10 and then start doing research on the markets to see if they have enough clients, and then to find those specific clients and then to be able to craft your message so that they'll pay attention and they'll be able to respond to what it is that you sell from a service perspective. So this is hard. This takes homework. This is going to be something that needs to be gone through. But it goes from I can sell a service into 100 markets to there are 3 markets that are very good because they have a large enough volume of agencies, associations, hospitals that are of a perfect size for my particular service, which I've sold successfully into other similar markets. You can see that now we're getting down to the ability to really narrow in, and then that is going to help with your research. And why do we want to do this? It's because, and no big surprise, this is one of the core elements of the FITT training and getting a CITP degree, is that being able to quickly streamline and view, for example, even a proposal to see whether or not it's going to be one that you can win, and you just know it instinctively. Having worked with hundreds of companies now, within pretty much 2 or 3 minutes of reviewing a website or listening to what they do, I can tell whether or not they're going to be successful in at least 5 to 10 different markets. And that's because a large part of that is the CITP, but it's also because the FITT training courses teach you to evolve this step-by-step process and be able to avoid wasting time when you're doing market research. Because let's face it, there's millions and millions of websites, articles, things that you can research online, and you just don't have the time, especially as a consultant, to be wandering through more than a couple of hundred websites at tops, to be honest. And you really want to be able to bring that down to something that you can do 5 steps and then be able to quickly go through, identify if a market's right for you, and then start researching that market and narrow down the number of things you need to research to hopefully below 100. And then that way you're actually capable of winning in those particular markets rather than spending 6 months just reading about them. So no big surprise. Here are the steps. And I use this constantly to be able to reassess a new market within a certain sector for a specific company. I want to know if I'm ready. I want to know if I have capacity, and I need somebody that can give me ideas about international, or even better, I've got somebody on my team where I have experience. I've been to 12 countries before. I can now do number 13. You want to understand who you're selling to and who you want to sell to. And is that client in international? What do they look like? How many of them are there? And then where do we need to go? Where do we find the largest clusters of that particular type of client? You need to make sure that you can explain to that client what you do and why working with you is going to help them win rather than necessarily working with somebody else. The more clear your messaging, the more capable your messaging, and the better and the pitch is, obviously that's going to help you. And then research. You have to do your homework. You have to find those clients. You have to find contacts within those organizations. You have to do the outreach. You have to bid. And more importantly, you have to make sure that you've connected with people in market that can help you with that particular process. So the International Market Entry Strategies FITT course is very, very good at this because it gives you a step-by-step approach to how you would actually do that type of research and how to simplify things. So how can we, learn to take a structured approach to doing any type of research, and then how do we simplify it? Because that's probably the biggest thing that we need to do. We need to be able to save the time, save the money, and to make sure that we can accomplish what we need to do in a very quick, simple, and efficient way. So we have reviewed essentially the value statement. We've reviewed your perfect client. And then we have to talk about how you're going to get out in front of them and how are you going to get your message out to them so that they will not just be interested, but actually seriously consider you for any type of a project or any type of a service. And so in some of the training courses we do, we spend a half a day talking about how to do marketing, and you can go on quite a bit on marketing. But the thing to realize is that 98% of all of the research that your prospects are doing on you or your sector or other particular types of consultants that deliver these services are now done over the internet. In the last 5 to 10 years, it doesn't matter what the sector is. It doesn't matter if it's marine, it's mining, it's oil and gas, it's professional services, and specifically international development services. There used to be booklets and lists, or you used to be able to join an association and then you'd end up on a list, or there were preferred vendors and or preferred suppliers lists where you could actually guarantee or count on the fact that the people doing research and looking for your type of solution would actually go to those lists first. Now we've discovered that 95 to 98% of anybody that's in purchasing or procurement checks Google first. And that is a huge change from 10 years ago. And the thing to understand, obviously, is that Google is notorious for only being able to list 10, 15, even 20 potential pieces of information on a single page. So you don't just have an issue with getting found, you have an issue with actually standing out. So anybody that does not have a website, I strongly recommend that you get one, that you build one. It doesn't have to be a $15,000 or $20,000 special. All you need to do is to make sure that you have a presence, because that's going to be the first spot. That's the first place they're going to look, and they're going to use Google to find you. And this is very, very important. Regardless of what size you are, it's very important to be part of that particular process. So once you do have a particular website, you need to look at a few things that are, let's put them into the best practices category. One of them is that you need to have the ability to present, again, your value statement and what you're capable of delivering within 7 seconds. And that's a crazy statistic. And it's something that we want to make sure that everybody fully understands. You land on a website, you have 7 seconds to present value and get them to want to either scroll, click through deeper into your website, or to figure out how to contact you. This is phenomenally challenging. So what we want to be able to do is to make sure that there are no pop-ups, there's no blockages, there's nothing that is going to stop anyone or delay anyone from coming to your website. You certainly want to make sure that you're using visual than text. For international audiences, it is very important to make sure that if you can figure out a way to present your value using an image, then do it. Because if you have more than 2 paragraphs of text, most people won't read through 2 paragraphs of text. If you have 5 or 6 paragraphs of text, then you're in a lot of trouble. Try to use imagery as much as you can. Yes, we're a little bit limited from cost perspective and cranking out very expensive websites, but we still want to be able to aim for that. We want a clear value statement, and this isn't just a pitch. This isn't just a tagline. This is certainly something that easily explains what it is that you do. And mobility enabled. This is huge. They have to be able to view it on their phone. 99% of anybody in certain markets in Asia don't even use laptops anymore. They're just using mobile devices. And if your website can't be seen on a mobile device, then you're not going to score any points with anybody that's trying to research what you're doing. So we'll just throw in the quick one on bidding itself, because when you do eventually get to that point where you're talking to a contact in market, they're suggesting that you bid on specific proposals. Those proposals are being put out by the Canadian government or by the United Nations or by the European Bank or anything like that. Then we want to be able to respond to those proposals and make sure that we're going to win. And you've probably seen an awful lot of these types of suggestions, best practices, and recommendations in the past, so we'll just quickly go through. The number one failure for any proposal is not answering all of the questions. Sometimes we think we can skip over things, but there needs to be a specific piece of text or a specific response put into even the categories and areas in the proposal and the response to the proposal that even say, I don't do this. You're not capable of actually presenting a clear value statement and why you should be chosen for this particular project within the first paragraph or first sentence of the description of your company. You have too wide of a selection process. You basically are saying we can do everything, and I can do it all for $15,000. You need to be extremely specific and then tie, obviously, all of your services directly to the needs of that particular. And this is only in the areas where you're actually allowed to do any freeform, to be honest. Errors, spelling mistakes, common mistakes, translations are poor. And that certainly is something that I think that we could go on for a couple of hours. But the reality is, spend the money, invest. If you're dealing with any, or at least a lot of the markets in Africa, French, and in Europe as well, French translation may be required in order to submit that proposal. Don't go cheap. Make sure that you have somebody that is presenting this. If you're translating your website, make sure that you've got somebody that you can trust to build out a very good and very professional version of whatever it is that's being translated. This is certainly something that is critical to success in a proposal process. I've seen a large number, especially in Canada, a large number of proposals be completely rejected simply because the French just wasn't there. So a final note before we open it up, hopefully to questions, and then we can follow up on a few of the things that we've been doing during this and the polls. Partnerships are probably the number one key success strategy that, from my particular perspective, and certainly from others that I've worked with, because it allows you to be able to, I guess you could say, gain much more trust within a specific market, more communication means more information about the market, what's going on. In fact, I've almost always worked with associations, chambers of commerce, trade offices within certain markets in order to try to leverage introductions or being, kind of brought in on meetings at a high level that are critical to the definition of the actual project itself. It won't surprise me at all if there's an awful lot of people within the audience that have done this on a regular basis, but it becomes critical when you start talking about that capacity thing. It certainly is something that you're going to want to be able to deal with on the ability to, I guess you could say, get higher levels of access into specific types of projects. And if you're able to partner with somebody that has that level of context or has the ability to be able to deliver on larger projects where you're either a subcontractor or you're partnered with them, then these are opportunities that are tremendously valuable, both from gaining experience as well as, of course, gaining consulting and earning consulting dollars. So find out who the particular associations are most specific to your sector and your service within that target market, and see whether or not you can reach out and say hi. Try to connect with Canadian associations that focus on international or have international partners. Let them introduce you to things. This is a huge benefit from being part of an organization. And finally, I'm going to do a shout out to the Trade Commissioner Service. So the Trade Commissioner Service is an extremely valuable and very good organization to work with. But the best way to work with them is to know which market you need to go into and what type of client you need to talk to. The worst thing that can happen with the Trade Commissioner Service is you walk in going, I don't know, but I still need your help. Because then they are limited in how much support that they can give because we haven't done our homework yet. If you do your homework, the Trade Commissioner Service loves it because they can then say, you need to talk to this person over here. If you come into market, I'll set up a meeting. That's what we want to be able to get to. And the Trade Commissioner Service is huge for that particular type of thing. So one of the things that FITT, by having the Certified International Trade Professionals, has is a large number of, I guess you could say, consultants or people that have worked in international that can provide the tips and the guidance. And there's an awful lot of testimonials on the FITT site, as well as within FITT literature, that can give some insights into some of the things that are best practice or some of the things that they suggest that you do. This goes back to finding that mentor and or trying to get advice from people that have been there and done that. So these are just a couple of examples, but there are dozens of them available on the FITT website and or through the FITT literature. And it certainly is a way to be able to do a little bit more research and to learn about how other consultants selling in services into international markets have been able to get success. And I certainly welcome you to go to the FITT site and to research and to find out what some of these contacts have done. So just to bring it all around to a final summary, and I've been belaboring this, but I certainly want to make sure that you understand that it's probably the most important thing that I teach as part of anything that I'm doing. Understand your true value to your clients, figure out who it is that you can sell to that is receptive and open to your particular needs, your services, and your message. Figure out where the largest cluster of those particular types of clients are located. Pitch using your best practices and making sure that you have the ability to have them find you on the internet and through a website, and then figure out how they get those services provided. Obviously, that becomes a understanding bidding and understanding projects and proposals, how they're funded, but that's all things that are typically well known by this particular community. Obviously, connect back up into the CAIDP and to potentially be connected and learn more about that. And again, FITT has several courses that actually speak directly to some of these particular types of topics, specifically around selling into international markets and preparing for them.
Thank you, Greg, for the informative presentation. We also appreciate FITT for making this webinar possible. Please remember to check out the link to FITT Skills Lite to find out more about what FITT can offer you and your organization. Keep an eye out for further additions to the CAIDP webinar series about fiat, blended finance, and the SDGs throughout the summer. Lastly, we will be discussing additional business tools and tips in the upcoming CAIDP conference on October 7th and 8th, titled Development Cooperation in an Age of Disruption. Please save the dates and stay tuned for details. Have a nice day, everyone.